Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my personal podcast tour of the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe. Gojira, Godzilla, 1954. As Peter Brothers pointed out in his book Mushroom Clouds and Mushroom Men, The Fantastic Cinema of Ishiro Honda, Godzilla, like all the best of the Japanese monster films, was not simply about a rampaging behemoth causing havoc to the population of Tokyo. Whilst you can sum up Godzilla's plot succinctly, its interwoven themes add greater complexity in a way future iterations could learn from. One of the weaknesses of monster movies, and for that matter most recent eco-disaster movies, is the lazy attempt at creating human drama on the ground, which is usually just predictable and disposable soap opera filler. They tend to be variations of divorced dad struggles to regain relationship with daughter/ex-wife, while city is reduced to more entertaining rubble by giant lizard/earthquake. Godzilla's human interest story comes from writers and a director who are sincerely invested in what may have inspired their monster, and where humanity's actions are not so simplistic, nor as guilt-free as we'd like to believe. Director Ishiro Honda's experience in World War II left a profound mark on his attitude towards humanity and human responsibility. Near the end of the war, when Japanese soldiers occupied China, he made sure to treat the locals as decent people, rather than demonizing them as a faceless enemy. A pragmatic choice also, as the army's policy of living off the land meant that good relations with the native population could mean the difference between survival and starvation. In September 1945, he found himself again on the receiving end of enemy hospitality as a prisoner of war following Japan's surrender to Allied forces on the island of Soshu. His return home took him through the devastation of the city of Hiroshima. Ever since then, he said, I have felt that this atomic fear would hang around our necks for eternity. In episode 235, we covered the horrifying nuclear legacy that birthed Godzilla, including the tragic real-life deaths of the fishing boat crew that directly inspired the prologue of the film. It was a shadow that loomed over the film in much the same way as the Americans stood overlooking the country they now occupied as victors. On the surface, it's a popcorn movie about a coastal city besieged by a marauding colossal water lizard who scrabble to defend themselves until science comes up with a weapon to defeat him. This is the template of many Western 1950s monster movies. Before we get into how Godzilla differs, let's drill down into the prehistoric layers the movie excavates. Triggered by the disappearance of two fishing vessels from Odo Island, a venerable old local believes it to be a harbinger of an ancient aquatic creature known as Gojira. Villagers campaign to the government for help, who bring in paleontologist Yamane, a pleasingly thoughtful portrayal by Takashi Shimura. On arriving at Odo, he finds evidence of radioactive giant footprints and a trilobite in a stream that was supposed to be long extinct. A village alarm sounds, affording Yamane the chance to witness the destruction wrought by Gojira firsthand. Recounting the attack back home, the paleontologist is sure that this is a dinosaur reawakened by mankind's H-bomb testing. He is dismayed by a heavy-handed military attempt to depth charge Gojira, pleading the classic movie scientist case for study instead. His predictable plot motivation is immaterial though, since they can't contain the creature, much less kill him. Neither brute force nor Yamane's academic admiration can come up with a solution to a dinosaur rendered seemingly omnipotent by our own devices. Our only hope rests with Yamane's scientific colleague Sezikawa. He may be the key not only to humanity's survival, but what makes Godzilla the movie a rare beast. Through Sezikawa, the film asks uneasy questions about the true impact of weaponized technology, an ambivalence that was already in the zeitgeist. For those filmmakers brave enough to blame us rather than an alien or monster invader from outside. Robert Oppenheimer's chilling quote from the Bhagavad Gita's Vishnu, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," after detonating his own nuclear bomb in 1945, caused him an inner torment of culpability that long outlasted any celebration of scientific achievement. It's the same angst that grips Sezikawa. Under his eye patch, the young man has a lot going on. Actor Akihiko Hirata compellingly broods under the burden of not only invention, but crushing disappointment in love. he has been thrown over by the paleontologist's daughter Emiko for a handsome ship's captain, Ogata, Akira Takarada. This relationship will prove fateful and fatal, but let's not start the doomsday clock just yet. Leaving aside the love triangle for a moment, Sezikawa is drawn as much more progressive and responsible than his boss. He may miss out on having Yamane as a father-in-law, but he compares more favorably in having a moral compass that values humanity more than scientific advancement. He's also not tempted by the mad scientist trope of a boiling ego plotting to enslave us all, which is a relief, as he's come up with a prototype capable of just that in the wrong hands. He has kept it a secret till now, out of an admirable compulsion to avoid our increasing technological march to genocidal self-extinction. This paradoxical self-torture must eventually seek an outlet. His mistake, though, as he might see it, is that whilst concealing his technology from the military, he demonstrates his oxygen destroyer device privately to Emiko. She watches in horror as the grenade-like sphere is dropped into a tank full of fish, dissolves the oxygen and them. This is no way to win back his fiancée. It does, however, shock her into breaking her vow of secrecy. Before Emiko can spill the beans to her new boyfriend and her dad, Gojira resurfaces and attacks a train in Shinagawa, just to remind us this is not an episode of daytime drama. As Emiko, Momoko Kochi is a sensitive and delicate presence, whose docileness may not please modern Western feminists, but does contrast with the heavily weighted tinkerings of her male counterparts. And without her, the seemingly indestructible Gojira would have remained so. After another of Gojira's onslaughts on land, her witnessing of the overflowing hospitals of victims causes her morality to override her kept promise, and wheels are set in motion to reluctantly persuade Sezikawa to allow his oxygen destroyer to be used. There is no time to waste as the wrathful dinosaur returns to make mincemeat of an enormous electrified fence and the cityscape of Tokyo, with his cataclysmic bulk and vaporizing radiation breath ray. In this film, there is no easy escape from a mega lizard or a greater responsibility than oneself. As if to hammer home the message, Sezikawa ensures there will be no trace of his records before the weaponizing of his device. Upon finally asphyxiating Gojira in the sea, he cuts off his own airline and removes himself from the chessboard of life. The extinction of this proud, violated creature is appropriately mourned, just like King Kong at the end of that film, and it is left to Yamane to warn the audience that there is no victory to be celebrated, especially when we may be the cause of another Gojira. The adult gravity of the ending of Godzilla is also reminiscent of that of The Day the Earth Stood Still in 1950. Action with responsibility is the mission statement for the future, and only that can guarantee one. Other influences on the film's creation were The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms in 1953, and a profitable global re-release of King Kong the year before. Ishiro Honda was recruited for Godzilla by Toho's powerful producer Tomoyuki Tanaka, as he had a solid track record of box office hits as well as that vital underpinning of conscience that would be such a heartfelt through line. To envision Japan's own contribution to monster cinema would involve a new way of making films, and the project was put together with a very long pre-production process, under a veil of great secrecy. In the 1998 BBC documentary Godzilla, King of the Monsters, Honda's widow Kimi recalled it went under the codename Production G, and in scripts the monster was only identified with the initial G. Honda's great friend Akira Kurosawa was shooting his masterpiece The Seven Samurai on the Toho lot at the same time, and one of the actors, Yoshio Tsuchiya, remembered hearing the name Gojira bandied about, but no one was to know anything more about it during its shoot. Incidentally, Tsuchiya was a genre fan, and it was only his Kurosawa commitment that stopped him being in Godzilla. He went on, though, to appear in the sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, and many more monster as well as science fiction movies. Since Gojira didn't yet exist except as a concept, the artwork went through many iterations to capture his lizard-like form. Special effects maestro Eijo Tsuburaya was instructed by producer Tanaka to aim for something like the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. He turned the design job over to sculptor Teizo Toshimitsu, a Japanese sculptor and monster modeling artist. He would become the studio's premier modeler of kaiju, literally strange beast or monster, and Daikaiju, giant monsters, specializing in faces and prototype maquettes up to 1970. The origin of the name Gojira has been variously attributed, most commonly that it was a hybrid of Gojira, the Japanese word for gorilla, and Gojira, meaning whale. In the BBC documentary, Godzilla buff Tony Luke said his name was also the surname of a Toho publicity man. Kimi Honda dismissed such rumors in favor of the team's considered approach to every detail. In amusement, she offered, "The backstage boys at Toho love to joke around with tall stories." On screen, the world's favorite dinosaur became embodied for the first of a 20-year run by suit actor Haruo Nakajima, from 1954 to the end of the original Godzilla cycle in 1975. When he asked Tsuburaya how long it would take instead for Gojira to be realized in stop motion like King Kong, the effects whiz told him 7 years, but we only have 3 months. In fact, for decades until the advent of CGI, directing an actor in a suit demolishing practical model effects was a much faster and cheaper option for cost-conscious producers. Nakajima found himself on set inhabiting a costume that wasn't built to his measurements, and although it was ungainly and hard to breathe inside, it was at least relatively roomy. I could actually turn around inside the neck. I sort of rattled around inside it, he remembered, which explains a slight bodily bagginess you can detect here and there in his movement. The final piece of Gojira's distinctive image was his reptilian voice, that unforgettable baying shriek. Another element that had to be invented as reptiles don't roar. This was given to music composer Akira Ifukube as part of his soundtrack brief. He went to the local zoo for inspiration. Drawing a blank from the natural world, even bird voices, he ultimately settled on the sound of a double bass. They opened up the tailpiece for room to maneuver so it could be played by gloved hands scraping down the strings. Upon release, Godzilla was equally discordant to the ears of critics who trashed it, but the public came out in droves, making it a stellar box office hit. When it came to American audiences, though, it was considered too soon to offer them a film made by their once perceived enemy, so the decision was made to shoot scenes with American actor Raymond Burr, later famous as TV's Perry Mason, as on-the-spot media journalist Steve Martin, to intercut into the narrative for the US release in 1956. The grave journalistic solemnity of his delivery is effective, reminiscent of Ed Murrow's powerful broadcasts from London during the Blitz of World War II. "Neither man nor his machines are able to stop this creature." In a 1993 TV interview with Bob Costas, Burr recounted filming all of his material in one 24-hour period at the smallest studio in Los Angeles on Western Avenue. In 1963, a much more drastic reshaping was done for the American market of Honda's King Kong vs. Godzilla, which we will explore in a later episode. Long-standing rumors that they changed the ending to allow Kong to win are untrue, and to be fair, Honda himself re-edited the film twice during the 70s. Whether the franchise was watered down or not, along the way, as we shall see, it morphed through a diminishing fan base age from adults, through college students, to children, to its detriment. This temporarily killed Gojira off in 1975, before being revitalized a decade later in a return to its original, more serious intent. Then, becoming dormant after another run, to, well, enough deaths and rebirths to fittingly mimic the indomitability of Gojira himself. Stay tuned for more future episodes of Toho Monster Mayhem. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe.